we talk about the real policy behind the headlines and not just the politics. And I think that's also a big differentiator for us.
Hello, and welcome to The Conversation. I'm Dasha Burns, Politico's White House Bureau Chief, and every week on this show, I invite one of the most compelling and sometimes unexpected power players in Washington and beyond in for a chat to find out how they're navigating and shaping this incredible era of American politics. This week, I got the chance to speak with Abby Phillip, the host of CNN NewsNight with Abby Phillip, a Politico alum and author of the new book, A Dream Deferred, Jesse Jackson and the Fight for Black Political Power. We talked about her new book and how she approaches her show on CNN. Here's my chat with Abby Phillip. Abby Phillip, my friend, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you.
So good to see you. We miss you here in DC, but I do want to start with your excellent new book that you have out on the civil rights legend Jesse Jackson. You put a specific focus on his two presidential campaigns in the 80s. Why did you decide to write this book and focus on his political career?
Yeah. Well, Dasha, I've covered politics my entire career, and I watched the 2016 cycle, the 2020 cycle, even the 2024 cycle. And there's a clear trend in this country toward a kind of economic populism. There's sort of this economic discontent that is roiling this country, and it's fueling politics on the right in the form of Donald Trump. But I also think it fueled the politics on the left in the form of people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and others. And in that era, around that time when Sanders did his second run, a lot of people who lived through Jesse Jackson, who came out of those campaigns, they said, you can't understand Bernie Sanders and what he's doing and what he's building on without understanding Jesse Jackson. Because in many ways, Bernie is, as he said in the book to me, picking up where Jesse Jackson left off, rallying younger voters, talking about a sort of cohesive economic message that can unify people, a message that Jesse Jackson described as common ground that could connect steel workers in the Midwest and farmers and urban workers and people in the South. And to try to understand, where does that politics come from? What can it look like, especially for the Democrats, because Jesse Jackson ran as a Democrat, I think is what this book is about. It's about this era in history, but it's also about where we are right now and where things are headed.
As I talked to voters across the political spectrum during the 2024 campaign, I was hearing so many echoes of exactly what you're talking about. I do find it interesting, though, that Jackson was a major backer of Sanders in his 2020 campaign. But it's interesting because that power base of Black voters that Jackson helped build chose Biden in that election. Has Jackson reflected on that at all? And I'm curious what you make of it.
I think there are a couple of parts of this. One is that there is this sort of pragmatic streak in the history of Black political activism. And that is really what helped Joe Biden the most. They were very interested as a voting bloc in stopping Donald Trump. And there was a belief that Joe Biden was the person to do that. But I think the second part of it is that what Jesse Jackson envisioned in terms of Black political power was what can happen when Black voters vote as a bloc and use their political power in a particular way. And you're totally right. Joe Biden was the biggest beneficiary of that in 2020. Now, on the other hand, when I was talking to Jesse Jackson about this after the 2020 election, I think he really felt that the true way for Democrats to address Trumpism was to go right at the thing that Trump was running on the most, which was a sense of, frankly, us versus them. That manifests in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's anti-immigration, but in other cases, it's tariffs. It's the deep state, the way that the system is rigged. I think Jesse Jackson understood that what Trump was doing was making an argument that in order to fight for regular Americans, you have to argue that the system is rigged against them. Democrats needed to take that on directly. And he thought that Bernie Sanders 2020 did the best job. Remember that Sanders had a voting base that came out in 2016. He built on it in 2020. And some of those same voters that cast a ballot for Bernie Sanders then turned around and cast a ballot for Donald Trump. So there's something going on there where it doesn't matter if you're left or right. those messages are resonating across the ideological spectrum. And Reverend Jackson was very passionate about the need for Democrats to address that and not just be anti Trump for all the reasons that they want to be anti Trump.
Democrats are in this moment of soul searching right after the 2024 election. And I'm
Yeah.
sure any one of the different factions of the coalition can draw lessons from Jackson's career. But I'm curious what you make of his legacy that you think is most instructive for Democrats now.
Remembering when you read the book, you see a Jesse Jackson that kind of shows up everywhere. He's like in Austin at Farm Aid with Willie Nelson, talking to a bunch of white farmers and Texans about his campaign. He is in the Midwest and he's in Missouri.
Again, similar to what Trump did in 24, right? Going to the Bronx, going to the South.
Going to the South, leading up to 1984, he went and he sat with George Wallace, the former segregationist governor.
Yeah.
There was no place he wasn't willing to go to talk to voters. And we've had now 3 election cycles in which a lot of the rhetoric from some Democrats has been they are bad. They are not like us, from the deplorables to all these other things. And I don't think actually that's the way that Jesse Jackson practiced politics. He did not think that there were categories of voters who couldn't be reached by his message. I think people should listen to or read his 1984 Democratic National Convention speech because it's very instructive. He tried to connect all of those different parts of America and say, actually, it's not that we have all of these things that are different about us. It's actually that we have a lot of things that we share. And what we share is a desire to have a better future, a desire for a moral compass for the nation and how it's governed. I think Democrats need to get back in the practice of going everywhere and not counting out voters, because especially in this Trump era, I think that it seems that there are many voters who are out of reach. But if Democrats want to rebuild what they lost in 2024 in particular, they're going to have to go to those communities and figure out a way to persuade. And that is what Jesse Jackson did really, really well.
Did anything surprise you as you were reporting this out?
I think that maybe the most surprising thing is his depth. I think that he was not often credited with being incredibly smart and capable of handling a wide range of subject matters. As you know, when you run for president, you have to be fluent in all the things: foreign policy, domestic policy, economics, so on and so forth. And for somebody who came out of the Deep South, he came out of Jim Crow, single, unwed teenage mother, he went to a historically Black college. His facility with a wide range of subjects, his ability to engage with American presidents and foreign leaders and people on Wall Street, corporate CEOs, I don't think he gets enough credit for that, to be honest. It's an underrated requirement, frankly, for seeking the highest office in the land. It's just the ability to just take in reams of information, process it very quickly, and spit it back out to people in a way that resonates with them. And that is both a skill and it's also a gift, because the gift part is where you can translate it. That's what Bill Clinton had, this sort of relatability piece, right? Ronald Reagan had that. And I think Jesse Jackson also had that. And I spoke to so many people who worked with him who just talked about how completely tireless he was. He just never really stopped. There was not like a topic that he was like, okay, this is not for me, to a fault. Sometimes he was involved in way too much, but that is kind of what he was like. And I think I got really deep into some of these stories that really show that he is sort of in a category of people that is not that big. And those people tend to have aspirations for the presidency. So in a way, it did make sense.
I don't know about your presidential aspirations. I say that because some of the things that you're talking about here, being able to engage with this wide variety of people, being able to take in and be adept at so many different topics. I mean, that's something that you tend to do every single night. And I want to talk about your day job a little bit while I have you, which is anchor of CNN NewsNight. And what's so fascinating about the show is the life that it has outside of the actual show in the studio. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many moments that live on social media, on TikTok, on YouTube. Why do you think the show is resonating so much on these other platforms?
Because I think it's one of the few places where people see real debates happening. And there is a desire that we have been able to tap into that people have for really hashing it out with one another. Some of it is about them feeling reflected in the content. And I always say this because when we build our panel every night and people are like, it's too many people and all that stuff. But what we're doing is trying to have actual representation around the table of what the viewpoints are in the world. And so that's MAGA, that's non-MAGA Republicans, that's establishment Democrats, it's non-establishment Democrats, it's libertarians, it's people who are neither here nor there. And when people are at home and they're watching, what I hope that they get is that they watch and they say, yeah, that's what I think. And then they hear someone disagree with them, and they hear for the first time a counter argument to the thing that they believe. So I want them to both be represented and also be challenged at the same time. And that's what our show does. And I think it's interesting. And it's frankly, it's real. Sometimes it goes viral because things get a little heated or a little messy or whatever. And I think that is also real. That when we think about how we debate with our friends and our family at the dinner table, the Thanksgiving table.
Familiar. Yeah.
It seems about right? Like sometimes we're talking over each other a little bit. We're not like folding our hands in front of ourselves. That's just not how we express things that matter to us. And so the show reflects that.
The conversations, as you said, can often be heated. Sometimes it does get like pretty
Yes.
personal, as politics often can. I'm curious about your thought process as you think about how you structure these panels and approaching like the really hot button debates. What makes a good one and what makes a bad one?
So I would actually say that a lot of the things that go viral, not necessarily the things that I think are the best parts of the show. We don't control what people clip and put out there and what they feel compelled to share. But I think people like it because it's entertaining. But I think that we also have a lot of really interesting, substantive conversations. Last night on the show, we had a conversation about the Chuy Garcia seat where he allegedly gave his chief of staff the heads up, and then that person was able to file just in the nick of time and not allow anybody else to. We had three sort of left-leaning people at the table, and they were all willing to say, you know what? We should call a spade a spade. We should call it out. And then we also had Scott Jennings at the table, and he was like, he's not the only one who's done this. I've literally experienced other candidates like in Kentucky doing this. And so we have these conversations that don't necessarily force people into their corners where they're just sort of defending their team. And we also have a lot of substantive policy conversations. Around the time of Liberation Day, we had so many great debates between economists. We would have Richard Quest on, and we would have a conservative economist on, and we would have them really kind of hashing out the real economics of Trump's tariff policy and what the data says and what it means and who pays. Richard Quest is not an economist, but he's a sort of economic anchor and correspondent, but he's really entertaining, and they know how to make it interesting, and it's engaging, and it's substantive. One of the things that I like that we do that I don't think gets done enough is that we don't just talk about how is it playing in Washington, how is it going to play in the polls. We talk about what is the actual thing that we're talking about here. Who actually pays for tariffs? What are the consequences of us bombing Iran? We talk about the real policy behind the headlines and not just the politics. And I think that's also a big differentiator for us.
I think it is a challenge for any of us with these sorts of platforms right now, given how much is happening every single day in the news, given the sort of pop political stories and then the policy political stories. Are there things that you feel like you're really sick of covering right now?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
spill a little tea. What
yeah,
are you?
I mean,
what are you sick of talking about? That doesn't mean you're not going to talk about it, but
I am a little fatigued by the Epstein story. I think that it's very important for the victims to get justice, but I do think that the political conversation around it is not necessarily to that end. And I think that there's a desire on both sides to just cast blame in a partisan way that is completely disconnected from the real story here, which is a story about powerful men behaving badly and getting away with it. And that doesn't have a partisan identifier to it. And I also prefer, when we talk about stories, to actually have real information to discuss. And the thing about the Epstein files is that we
Yeah,
don't have
that's a good
them.
point.
We don't
Mm-hmm.
actually know what's in these documents. So there is a lot of speculation about it. And I think that the way that this has devolved into, well, Democrats were involved or Trump was involved, but the truth is we don't really know. I don't think it's great for the victims. I don't think it's great for anyone. And I am really looking forward to when these documents are out, because that's when we'll really be able to talk about something. We will actually have information, and we need that right now, because in the absence of that, I think the partisan blame is going in overdrive. The speculation is going in overdrive. People can say whatever they want seemingly, because there are no facts to check them on, very limited facts.
Yeah.
And I think we just need more information. And I'm ready for that part of the story. And I'm kind of over this part of the story.
Well, the question I have is what is actually going to be released, and is anybody going to be satisfied?
Exactly.
I'm skeptical that this will have like a clean bow tie conclusion.
It rarely does.
It rarely does. I'm also dreading the resurgence of the shutdown story when we get into January. So we're both going to have to buckle up for all of this. But Abby, thank you so much for joining me. It's such a treat to have you on, and I hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you so much for having me, Dasha. Appreciate it.
This has been The Conversation with Dasha Burns. We'll be back next week. If you want to catch future episodes of The Conversation, be sure to click that subscribe button below. Thanks for watching.